Hello aspirants and welcome again to Legacy IAS Academy. In this lecture, we will be looking at the middle class 2.0. So we'll understand what is middle class 2.0. Before that, we'll also understand what was the initial middle class. At the same time, what this middle class 2.0 constitute of, what are the benefits that we have already gained because of it, and there still exists a very big challenge. Even though there have been certain benefits, we'll look at that as well. So what is this news all about? The news talks about the 5 big IT companies constituting huge amount of job creation or employing huge number of people. At the same time, the private sector employing way more people than the government sector. Now that was not the case previously, is what we will also see. So this is it a good thing, is it a bad thing? See, if overall more number of jobs are created, it's a good thing prima facie on the look of it. But even after all of this, one very important thing we'll see is India still has a major job challenge. So we'll see what the challenge is all about. Now, what is this middle class 2.0? Before understanding this, we need to first understand what was middle class 1.0, or the initial or the classical traditional middle class. If we talk about this classical traditional middle class, they were created, this middle class was created primarily on the basis of the jobs that were created in the public sector. The babus, the officers, the bank employees in the public sector banks, in the nationalized bank, the government jobs, the clerks, the POs, etc. All these people were or still are the part of the middle class. That's what gave rise to middle class in India. Now, that middle class was going on well. Now also, so basically all of them are of course salaried people, right? But in the government sector. If you talk about middle class 2.0, one factor is common, that they are also salaried employees. However, there is one thing which has changed. Instead of the government sector, they are employed in the private sector. And this is what we are calling as middle class 2.0. So how has this nature or trend changed over the years? So if you have a look at it with respect to the data of 1995, not a long time ago, just 3 decades ago, a long time after independence, let's 45 years after independence, and just 30 years back, if you look at it, the public sector stood at 194.7 lakh. That means it provided close to 195 lakh jobs. As far as the private sector is concerned, at that time, only 80 lakh jobs were provided by the private sector. So it is very comprehensively less than half the jobs were created by the private sector. This was the situation 3 decades back. But if you look at the situation presently, not presently, but up to 2012, why 2011-12? Why we are taking 2012? Because after 2012, there is no such government data that has been published. So at least we have the data till 2012. So that's what we will look at. So we will see that the public sector undertaking employment fell to 176. So from approximately 195, it went to 176 lakh. Whereas if you look at the private sector, from around 80 lakh, it has gone to 119.7. That is approximately 120 lakh. So there is a 50% increase. There is a 50% increase, whereas here it is a 10% dip. So the overall impact is even more. So that is how the transition has taken place. Now, not just that. If you look at middle class 2.0, as I said, after 2012, there is no data. Plus, this data which is till 2011-12, which itself shows 50% increment, we need to understand that it is fair to say that the middle class 2.0 in fact held pace or kept pace or kept on increasing at a higher pace, specifically after 2011-12. That means the present data will be even more skewed in favor of the private sector than what we have already seen. Apart from that, COVID had hit 4.5 years, I think, yes, almost 5 years back. In fact, So in the last half a decade, if you look at, there has been a real boom in the private sector after COVID specifically. Why after COVID? Because after COVID, what happened is a lot of digitization has happened. You know, now many, and just take for example, many IT companies are now completely working from home. Andhra Pradesh government has talked about special focus on working from home specifically for women. At the same time, there are hybrid models now that are coming up. Those people who are going to offices all 5 days are now going just 2 to 3 times a day. All those things plus various other digitization has happened, as a result of which there is more boom in this middle class 2.0 after the COVID period. If you look at the head count of the big 5 companies, that is TCS, Infosys, Wipro, HCL and Tech Mahindra, these are all the tech giants in India. So if you look at the employment that they generated before or around 2020, it was 11.5, which has increased to above 16 lakh. Now recently there has been a downfall because of layoffs, because of the global economic slowdown. There is no doubt about it, but Indian economy, India's growth has still been robust, and this still is around 50% of an increase, which we can see over here. Now this particular data, this particular chart will tell you the details of all the things that we have seen so far. So what does it talk about? Number of regular employees in lakhs in railways and the central public sector enterprises. Means what? The public sector. So we will see what is happening to the public sector. In lakh this number is, so railways had around 16.5 and CPSEs had 22 lakh. Now that has declined, this has declined. Now from this it has further declined. So you can see a continual decline is present, so much so that presently only 12.5 employed in railways and 8 in CPSEs, a total of 20 lakh, and earlier the total was how much? 36.5 lakh. So there is a downfall of almost 50% of employment has gone down. So where is it reflecting then? Look at the big 5 companies. So if you look at the big 5 companies specifically, we saw after the COVID boom. So if you look at after COVID, this was the COVID period and this is the recent one. So this is just 4.4 lakhs. Here it is over 6 lakhs. Here it is 2 and it is 3. 1.82. So everywhere you can see the increase. If you look at an overall from 11.5 to close to 15.5. As I said, by 2022 it was even higher. It was 16 lakh. This downfall, it has nothing to do with the digitization is reducing or anything like that. It has everything to do with the slowdown. When this arrests, this is going to further increase. I hope that's absolutely clear. If you look at the banking system also, banking system has also seen a shift. If you look at the public sector banks, from 8 lakh it has gone down to 7.4, whereas if you look at private sector banks, from 63,000, it's not 6 lakh, it is 63,000 to 8.7 lakh, more than 10-fold increase. Of course, this is taken into consideration after 1991, that means after the LPG reform, so it has to considerably increase. And what is increasing with the help of this is the middle class 2.0. I hope that's clear, with special focus on the big IT firms, the 5 IT firms. At the same time, the private banks have also led to a lot of increase. But what is the challenge? Even after so much of positive, what is the challenge? We're not talking about the challenge that those were public sector jobs, these are private sectors, no security, this, that. We're not even talking about that. So what are we talking about? We are talking about the fact that this middle class 2.0 that has started to exist, it is, of course, majorly related to the service sector, has mainly been in the services sector. Right. Now, why is that the case? Because unlike China, in India, industrial development did not take place properly. There was no structural transformation. What is structural transformation? See, W.W. Rostow had predicted that all the economies, improve or progress linearly through different sectors of the economy. First, the primary sector develops, then the secondary sector develops, then the tertiary sector develops. Now, India, after winning the independence, started focusing on agriculture, that is the primary sector, because we wanted to produce as much as it is required for us to consume, because India was a hungry country in the sense that people were hungry, people were poor, people were dying because of lack of food grains. That had happened in the Second World War during the British era, when there was food grains, but it was kept for the soldiers of the British soldiers, and Winston Churchill refused to give it to the Indians. So we have seen all those situations. We never want to face that situation, so we focused on this. Then we tried to focus on secondary sector in the second 5-year plan, but the investment requirement was very high and we could not sustain that focus. Why we wanted to focus? Because industrial sector, in agriculture sector, huge amount of labor was there. These labors could be trained a bit and can be transferred to the secondary sector, but that was not possible. And by the 1980s, what happened? ICT, information communication technology revolution came. So the third tertiary sector came into existence, and instead of focusing on secondary sector, we started directly focusing on the tertiary sector, because that is even more fast growing sector than the industrial sector. So because of it, what has happened is, in services sector, huge amount of jobs are being created, but service sector jobs are generally there for the better educated people, not for less educated people or uneducated people. With respect to education here, with respect to the degrees and the academic education is what we are talking about. Education is no means to say whether how good a skill set of a person is or how they will do in their life. It has nothing to do with that. But certain service sector jobs require certain certification. Based on that, if people are not that educated, they are facing a challenge. So if a person is undereducated or uneducated, the jobs in the services sector for them are very menial, trivial, very low paying. For example, the delivery people who are delivering through various delivery apps, etc. It's a low paying job. Compare a delivery person who's providing a service, at the same time an IT developer, this, that, who is again providing a service. There is a huge gap between the job pay. Of course, there's a huge gap between the requirement on the education side. I hope that is clear. So what is the solution for this? The solution, one of the solution can be equitable distribution. You can have a very simple example with respect to equitable distribution. You take note of any traveling app, any cab app. I won't want to target any app by taking their name over here, but any app through which you can book a ride for yourself. Now what happens is, the driver comes, let's say it's a cab. So the driver is given their time and labor. The cab is that of the driver generally, which is a capital asset, which would have costed the driver anywhere between 7 lakhs, 10 lakhs, 15, the SUVs 20, 25 lakhs in lakhs. This person is giving time, energy, effort, everything, the labor and the cab also, but it's the aggregator who provides the app platform and who maintains the app, who takes out a chunk of the profit that is there, right? A chunk of the money that is there. So that is one issue. What can be done is, and their engineers, everyone is getting paid high, plus there is a profit. So what can be done? Can these people also be made shareholders in that, or ESOPs in that, or maybe 10 lakh plus drivers? It may become difficult, but can we not have more equitable pay system in that? There is another app which I can name and I will, which does a very good job, is the app known as Nammayatri app. Now what it does is, it pays the entire money to the driver. So whatever the revenue is being generated, they don't take any cut. Entire money is paid to the driver. So now in this case, of course, the payment of these drivers would be higher. At the same time, they can provide rides at a cheaper cost to the consumer also. So it's a win-win situation. So things like this, solution like this, we should come up with, so that there is more equitable distribution. Jobs are created for less educated, uneducated, and in every level of the economy that is there. At the same time, this particular growth needs to be utilized in order to grow our industrial sector as well. So this middle class 2.0 is majorly in the services sector, and that too who are better educated. We need to spread this middle class 2.0 in the secondary sector, as well as can also extend it to the primary sector by increasing the income of the farmers. At the same time, we can also increase the benefits out of it for the people who are probably less educated with respect to academics education. Thank you.